Hi there, my name is Yu and welcome to my channel. The subject we're going to be exploring today is why the parts of us that we hold the most contempt and disdain for are worthy of the most love and kindness. And this is very much a subject that's easier said than done. You know, the idea of loving the parts of us that we hold in such contempt is a very challenging and very difficult thing. But I'm going to take you through today why it's necessary, often why we end up in the place where we were left with no other choice but to give this a go, the forces that we're working against, and the power of and the counterintuitive irony that it's not until we love these parts of ourselves that we can actually really be free from their yoke. So, now what are these parts that we're talking about? Now, I'm not talking about my problem is I care too much about people. We're talking about the parts of us that we hold a certain level of either disgust or disdain or real contempt for. So that could be slothfulness, gluttony, it could be rage, anger, vindictiveness, pettiness, selfishness, excessive pride, arrogance. All these kind of qualities that we, to varying degrees, maybe we're in denial about at times to others. We deflect, we justify, we obscure. But some part of us kind of knows, like, I'm this way and I don't want to be this way. And what we do most of the time is we attempt to delete these aspects of ourselves, deny, push through, cover up, conceal, and move forward. Yet they keep rearing their heads, they keep resurfacing. And not only do we have the sense of we've failed to diminish these qualities, but we also have the shame that we somehow can't manage to do that, and we're back where we started after exhausting all these resources and ideas and energy into kind of not being this way. Here I am, this way, all over again. So for many of us, including myself, we arrive at this kind of exhausting point. But even with that, it's amazing how habits work, how our patterning works, or we can keep feeling like the new diet, if I just try this new thing and I do it all over again, this will be finally the answer. And, we need to some degree maybe to get to a point of exhaustion. And part of what makes this very challenging is we're also dealing against a cultural messaging system, which is bad things should happen to bad people, bad qualities deserve to be punished. It's a very strong message in our culture. Just think about the premise of any revenge film is that all the violence and horror that the protagonist may unleash on the people who did bad things are all justified because of all the terrible things they did at the start of the movie. It's how we demonize others. We prescribe bad qualities to this minority or this group, and therefore we can do all these terrible things to these people. But we have an internalized version of that. We have an internalized sense of there is something bad in us and it needs to be punished and wiped out, and there is a kind of violence we have towards these aspects of ourselves, which we're not able to see, often is very part of the very thing that we're struggling against. It's part of the holding it together mechanism. So what's required is a different perspective, a different understanding, because it can't just be like, well, you need to love these parts of yourself and just take my word for it. We need to understand why we need to love these parts of ourselves and what's really going on. And if you study family systems and you understand that within families there are roles within these systems, and the scapegoat or the teenager, the sort of the delinquent teenager in the family through a family systems perspective is revealing something about the family system. And the same way, if there's some aspect of ourselves that feels aberrant or feels self-destructive or feels works against our best interest, like these strict parents, we're trying to send that part of ourselves off to boot camp to get better without really understanding what this child is representing, what this delinquency is trying to say to the family system. And for all of us, when we really start to trace back what's beneath the behavior, what's beneath this aspect of myself I don't like, we'll discover there's some unmet need, some wound, or some defense at some point in our life that we developed in order to protect ourselves from something. And when we understand it from that perspective, then the idea of loving ourselves, the idea of showing kindness, not to the behavior, but the underlying kind of energy beneath it, then it becomes more understandable that this could work. But to do this requires a risk. To do this requires a willingness to move in this kind of counterintuitive way. Because there's a fear, I think, for many of us, that if I greet this aspect of myself with love and understanding, then I'm kind of indirectly indulging in it, I'm permitting it. And we're not doing that. We're just looking to understand. We're just stopping for a minute and saying there's something about my suppressing and violence towards this part of myself that just doesn't work. Because it's still here, it's still operational. And yeah, maybe at times I can shove it under and it goes, but in general it keeps showing up, and sometimes worse. So something's not working in our approach. There's something not working in this process of this. So what happens when we do this? What happens when we really look with curiosity, kindness, and tenderness? And if we're willing to cross that threshold, we're willing just to shift our perspective just a little and be open to meeting and greeting these parts of ourselves that we once looked with contempt. In my experience, something wonderful happens. There is this sense of space that feels like it's created. There's a shift in what that aspect is and how it shows up. And there's a feeling of, there is room for change here that doesn't involve this duality of good, bad, good me, bad me, and me in this internal struggle, the devil and the angel, battling it out for my soul kind of feeling. Rather, there's this wider perspective that gives us this space for something to shift and something to change. And it's almost like whatever that behavior is or aspect is, when it's suddenly seen like that, and there's an acknowledgement of this something, there's a recognition of itself, then it softens a little bit. It's almost like it acknowledges that. And what this also does, it enables us to understand others differently. So when we see the things in us we don't like have their origin in something that has gone awry somewhere in our life, then when we look at all the baddies and all the villains and all the terrible people in the world, and there are plenty of them, then it also enables us to give perspective on that there are no real villains. There are no real baddies in inverted commas. And that's not to diminish that bad things happen and bad things occur and terrible and horrifying things occur. But when we understand that this isn't arising from someone who's intrinsically bad, it's someone who's intrinsically deluded and living in some kind of illusion of their separation, and they're separated from something deep inside themselves. So as we make that mending, that amends, that reconciliation with all these different aspects of ourselves, then we create space to hold that same compassion for everyone in the world to the best of our ability, as we meet others just like we meet ourselves. And look, it feels like we're in very dark times. Certain things are kind of folding in on themselves. And I think there is this real temptation to vilify the villains and to kind of remove compassion's for the victims, but it isn't for the villains. And care and love is for the people who are oppressed, not the oppressors. And again, I'm not justifying or saying all these things are okay. But but in response to what's happening in the world and in ourselves, the more we meet things with kindness and love, then the more there is a capacity for a different us and a different world. So I hope this has made sense. I hope this has helped. If you've got any stories or anything insights you'd like to share about your own experience of this, please write them in the comments. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourself, and bye-bye.